Hello and welcome to the class on special rules of chess. In the first lesson, we have learned how to play chess, how the basic piece movements and almost all the rules of chess except a few of them which we are going to cover today. Well, these rules are slightly unusual and that is why I have termed them special rules. So which are the rules we are going to learn today? The first one is castling, the second one is En Passant, and the third one is stalemate. So let me show you one by one what these rules are and why they are so exceptional. Okay, while let's start. During a game of chess, one thing to observe is that both the players move alternately. That means white makes the first move, black replies, white plays the second move, black replies, and so on till one side surrounds or traps the opponent's king. We call it checkmate. We have also seen that at the start of the game, both sides should uh, place the chessboard in such a manner that there is a light square on the right side of both players. After placing the board in the proper manner, we have to place our chessmen or chess pieces. We have to arrange them properly. The rooks have to be placed in the corner, and next to the rooks we have the knights, then we have the bishops, and we keep the king and queen in the center of the board. And in front of the king and queen we arrange 8 chess pawns. So this is exactly how white arranges, and black also does exactly the same. Black mirrors white. He has 2 rooks at the side, 2 knights, 2 bishops, king and queen in the center, 8 pawns in front of these chessmen. Now, there is one question which arises. Where should the king and queen be placed? Well, it's easy to remember if you think this way. The black queen stands on black square, the white queen stands on white square, facing each other. So here the queen, black queen on black square, white queen on white square, and both the king queens are actually facing each other. And the king stands next to the queen. Okay, so the queen, white square, black queen, black square. So easy to remember. Now, once you start playing, white makes the first move and black replies, white makes the second move. So it's only one move at a time for both players. But there's one exception, and that exception is the rule of castling. During castling, a player is permitted to move not one but 2 moves, 2 chessmen simultaneously. And let me show you how a castling happens. Suppose this is the scenario. This is the situation. During a game of chess, you get only one opportunity to castle. And during castling, the position of king and rook are interchanged. The king suddenly moves not one square, usually king moves only one square, but during castle, the king is permitted to jump 2 squares sideways towards the rook, and the rook sits next to the king. And this is only done in one move. Okay, this is an exception to the normal rule where you make only one move at a time, but here 2 chessmen move simultaneously. And this castling can also be done on the other side. The king can also interchange position with the other rook by moving 2 squares to the left, and this rook sits next to the king. Okay, just like what happened on the right side. But when we do in the short side, That means here the rook is moving only 2 squares, but on the left side the rook is moving 3 squares. Okay, so when we castle this side, we call it castling on the queen side, because initially the queen was sitting here. So when the king is interchanging position with the rook, which was on the side of the queen, we call it queen side castling or long castling, because the rook moves 3 squares. Okay, so this is how a castling happens, and black can also castle in the same way. For example, white castles here. Black has the option of castling either here or here in one move. Now there are 3 conditions where you cannot castle. The first one is, well, let me show you some special situations where you cannot castle or you are not permitted to castle. For example, in this position, if white plans to castle, and if he wants to castle on the king side, he will not be allowed, because the root of the king is guarded by opponent piece. King cannot jump over or cross over a square which is controlled by opponent piece. So had the king gone here, it would have been illegal move, because king is not permitted to stay on an attacked square. King therefore is not permitted to jump over this square and castle. Right, so that is the first condition you have to remember. The side where the king is going, the king cannot jump over this square if it is attacked. Suppose white decides to castle on the other side, because this side he cannot castle legally. But even this won't be permitted, because this knight is controlling this square. If the king sits here or the king stands here, it will be under check. So the king is not permitted to jump over a square which is controlled by opponent. It is not permitted to finally settle on a square which is controlled by opponent. And also, let's assume both the players make these kind of moves and black plays check. When it is under a check, the king cannot castle. So king cannot castle when it is under a check, if it lands on check after castling, or the square it crosses over is controlled by the opponent. So castle can only be done when there is no check or the king is not harassed. Secondly, prior to castling, you have to ensure the king has not moved anywhere. It is always on its initial square. And the same applies to the rook also. If the rook had moved here and then it has come back here, then this rook will lose its right to castle with the king. Okay, the king can still castle with the other rook, but before castling, one must make sure the rook and the king hasn't moved anywhere before castle. Okay, they should be on the original squares, and only then you are permitted to castle. So this is the rule of castling. You can go through this again and again and be sure about the rules and apply the rule of castling in your practical game. Okay, now we move to the next important special rule which we are going to learn, that is En Passant. It's a French word. In English, well, the players mostly say En Passant. It simply means while passing. So let's see who passes in what way. Let's assume that the game has started this way. White makes one move by moving the pawn 2 squares. Black also does the same. And white advances his pawn. And black decides to play this pawn 1 square. Now, as per the rule of chess, we may or may not capture this pawn. It's our wish. Okay, we may play some other move or we can capture this pawn. Now, this is known to us. But suppose black plays this pawn 2 squares forward, jumping over this square. Had it moved 1 square, white could have captured. But black doesn't give white the chance and he plays this move, two squares jumping over this captured square. Now, even here, as per the rule of chess, we can capture this pawn this way, as if the pawn had moved one square. Okay, but there's a very important caveat, there's a very important condition, that is, this chance remains for only one move. You can capture this pawn, but if you do not, right now, you will never get a second chance to play this. Okay, so compared to this, if black plays here, white can capture now or maybe even later. But if the pawn moves here, white still gets chance to capture this pawn, but only for one move. Let's assume white plays this move and black plays here. Now, as per the rules of chess, you can still capture this pawn by this rule, En Passant, but you can not capture this d pawn because it's too late. Okay, you just get one chance to capture the opponent pawn. It's En Passant only when, well, if this pawn stands on 5th rank or maybe black pawn stands here. Okay, and okay, let's assume black plays here and white plays this move. Then black also gets chance to capture this. Okay, so this is the En Passant rule. And the third special rule which we are going to learn now is the rule of stalemate. Now this is a very interesting rule which says, what is a checkmate? Checkmate is a situation where you check your opponent, you threaten to capture the opponent king, you tell your opponent, your king cannot stand here because I'm threatening to capture, so the king has to move somewhere. And the king cannot move anywhere because all the squares, wherever it goes, it will be captured. That's a checkmate. But in case of a stalemate, it's very similar with the difference that there is no check. For example, here white plays this move. And now black king has no move, just like checkmate. It can't move here, it can't move here, it can't move here, because in all cases the queen will capture the king. But there is no check. At present the king is safe here. And the king cannot move anywhere. So in this particular situation, instead of white winning, the game is actually draw. None of the sides is a winner. So isn't it unfair? Well, it's a very nice rule because even though white is very close to winning, this queen is very powerful standing in front of the king. White has to be very careful not to allow stalemate. He has to check and only checkmate the opponent king. Okay, the final trap should be in such a manner that wherever the king stands, there is a check. Even in the present condition, there should be a check. But here, there is no check at present. So this is a draw. And there can be many different ways of stalemate. We shall be learning throughout the course. So you have to be careful about stalemate also. So that ends our session today. We have learnt castling, we have learnt En Passant, and we have learnt stalemate. With this, you have learnt all the rules of chess. Now you can play freely, you can practice with your friends, and now you shall be learning the various techniques of playing properly from the next video. Thank you.